Washington Democrats scrambled Tuesday to extend funding for the federal government, with less than 72 hours left to avoid a shutdown, with negotiations in Congress at a stalemate, as President Joe Biden canceled a planned trip to Chicago to focus on budget talks. A possible shutdown would happen at the start of the fiscal year Friday, if a bill to fund the government doesn't pass both the House and Senate. Senate Republicans blocked a Democratic effort to combine government funding with an increase in the amount the country can borrow. The debt limit, which the country is projected to reach in mid-October, is another pending crisis. Democrats contend it's irresponsible to block an increase in the debt limit, but Republicans contend the Democrats must approve it on their own. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, R. Kentucky, proposed Monday to vote on government funding alone, without an increase in the debt limit. But he needed unanimous consent to debate the proposal, and Democrats objected. More Congress is weeks away from a debt crisis that could lead to default. Is it time to panic? Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen warned Congress on Tuesday the country would reach the debt limit October 18. She urged lawmakers to protect the full faith and credit of the country as soon as possible. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, D. Calif, and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, DNY, each said they would take further action this week to extend funding before the new fiscal year begins Friday. Work on the debt limit could require more time and debate. This isn't your typical Washington fracas, and it shouldn't be treated as such, Schumer said. It has far more severe consequences than the typical political catfight. Besides overall government funding and debt, lawmakers face votes on infrastructure and President Joe Biden's social welfare priorities this week. Biden cancels trip to Chicago to continue negotiations on infrastructure, safety net bills with his domestic agenda facing a make-or-break moment. President Joe Biden has canceled a trip he planned to make to Chicago Wednesday, so he can continue negotiations with members of Congress, according to a White House official. The trip, organized for Biden to highlight businesses that require COVID-19 vaccinations, will be rescheduled, the official said. Biden has been meeting with Democratic senators in search of a compromise to appease both progressive and moderate Democrats. The latter has balked at the steep price tag of his $3.5 trillion reconciliation plan, which includes Biden's climate and social safety net proposals. In meetings and calls over the weekend and through today, President Biden has been engaging with members of Congress on the path forward for the Build Back Better Act and the bipartisan infrastructure deal, the official said. He will now remain at the White House tomorrow to continue working on advancing these two pieces of legislation to create jobs, grow the economy, and make investments in families, rather than failed giveaways to the rich and big corporations. The official added, there will be more to come on his engagement over the next couple of days. Biden hosted Sens. Kyrsten Sinema, D. Arizona, and Joe Manchin, D. West Virginia, at the White House for separate meetings Tuesday. The decision to back out of the Chicago trip underscores the urgency for the White House to strike a deal with Democrats before the House on Thursday is scheduled to take up Biden's $1 trillion infrastructure bill, which passed the Senate in August. Progressive House Democrats have warned they won't vote for that package unless they see progress on the larger social welfare package that includes childcare, Medicare expansion, climate initiatives, caregiving investments, and other liberal priorities. Infrastructure vote remains nail-biter. A group of moderate House Democrats continues to push for a Thursday vote on infrastructure, but a larger group of progressive Democrats contend they won't vote for that bill without the $3.5 trillion social welfare package. 2. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, D. Calif, set up the Thursday vote after her commitment to a Monday vote slipped. The $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill includes $550 billion in new funding. But in the narrowly divided House, if Republicans unite against the bill, the loss of 4 Democrats could reject it. Representative Josh Gottheimer, DNJ, one of 9 moderates who negotiated the deadline for the infrastructure vote, said Americans can't afford to wait any longer. New Jersey has the 3rd worst roads in the country, he said. The Lincoln Tunnel between New Jersey and New York is crumbling after more than 100 years, he said. There is nothing partisan about fixing our roads and bridges and tunnels, he said. But the head of the Progressive Caucus, Representative Pramila Jayapal, D. Wash, said Tuesday after a group meeting that members will vote for both bills, but a majority of our members will only vote for the infrastructure bill after the president's visionary Build Back Better Act passes. This agenda is not some fringe wish list. It is the president's agenda, the Democratic agenda, and what we all promised voters when they delivered us the House, Senate, and White House, Jayapal said in a statement. Bart Jansen Psaki, White House hopes McConnell gets out of the way on debt ceiling issue. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said Tuesday that Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is pursuing different paths Senate Democrats can take as Republicans refuse to help raise or suspend the debt ceiling. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, R. Kentucky, has said for months Republicans will not help Democrats. Republicans also blocked a funding bill Monday that not only addressed raising the debt limit, but also extended funding for the federal government. It's also our hope, if Senator McConnell isn't going to help us avoid a default and a shutdown, at least he'll get out of the way and let Democrats do it alone, so we can avoid a default. So, right now, that question remains up in the air, Psaki said. Democrats are scrambling to avoid a looming government shutdown on Thursday, and a default later in October, without the help of their GOP colleagues. Schumer on Tuesday asked for unanimous consent to hold a Senate vote to suspend the debt limit with a majority, or 51-vote threshold, to avoid the Senate filibuster. However, McConnell objected. Now the number of ways they can address the issue are dwindling. One way, without Republican votes, is if Democrats pursued it through budget reconciliation, by attaching the debt ceiling measure to a larger budget bill Democrats are planning to pass. That bill would not need any GOP support in the Senate, but leaves Democrats short on time to get it done. Savannah Berman Senate at an impasse on raising the debt limit. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, DNY, said he would propose legislation Tuesday to suspend the country's limit on borrowing. But it would require unanimous consent to debate the measure, and Senator Ted Cruz, R. Texas, said he would object. Schumer said Republicans raised the debt limit on their own years ago, with the consent of Democrats. So he said he would try that strategy again. It's a straightforward proposition. If Republicans really want to see the debt ceiling raised without providing a single vote, I'm prepared to hold that vote, Schumer said. After last night, it is clear insanity and disaster are now the Republican Party line, and it's endangering the very bedrock upon which both our economic viability and financial credibility stand. But Republicans have suggested Democrats raise the debt limit as part of their $3.5 trillion package of social welfare programs. Democrats have been reluctant to do that because it would link borrowing for previous spending decisions with the package of President Joe Biden's priorities that have not yet been approved. It's a game. It won't work. Schumer knows it won't work, Cruz said. But he's happily playing the game right now. When this fails, I fully expect that Schumer is going to surrender. The path to surrender isn't clear. Sen. Dick Durbin of Illinois, the second-ranking Democrat in the chamber, said the strategy is also a non-starter because it would take several weeks to cross legislative hurdles. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen warned Congress on Tuesday the country's borrowing authority will be exhausted October 18. Bart Jansen, Nancy Pelosi. Plans to avoid government shutdown, raise debt ceiling could come today, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, D-Calif, said new legislative proposals to avoid a government shutdown and raise the nation's borrowing ability could come as early as Tuesday. Funding for the federal government expires Thursday at the end of the fiscal year. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen warned Congress on Tuesday that the country will reach its debt limit October 18. Lawmakers also face a Thursday vote on $1.2 trillion infrastructure legislation, while negotiations continue over details of a $3.5 trillion bill that includes most of Biden's domestic agenda. But she said infrastructure and the larger package would both be approved. We will pass both bills, she said. Lawmakers are debating how to avoid future votes on the debt limit. One option is from Representative Brendan Boyle, D. Pennsylvania, who proposed legislation with House Budget Committee Chairman John Yarmuth, D. Kentucky, to give the Treasury Secretary authority to raise the debt limit, which Congress could then vote to reject. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen warned Congress on Tuesday that the country will reach its limit on borrowing on October 18. The department has been taking extraordinary measures for months to avoid defaulting on its debts. The steps include not funding civil service and postal service retirement programs. But those measures will be exhausted, leaving very limited resources that will be depleted quickly. It is uncertain whether we could continue to meet all the nation's commitments after that date, Yellen wrote in a letter to leaders of both parties in Congress and on the tax writing committees. The full faith and credit of the United States should not be put at risk. She has already warned of catastrophic consequences if the country were to default on its loans. Just edging up the deadline can cause serious harm to business and consumer confidence, raise borrowing costs for taxpayers and negatively impact the credit rating for the United States for years to come, she wrote. Bart Jansen House to vote Thursday on bipartisan infrastructure bill. Another piece of legislation expecting a House vote this week is the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill, which includes $550 billion in new funding that the Senate has already approved. The bipartisan infrastructure bill enjoys broad support, but progressive House Democrats have insisted that it move in tandem with a $3.5 trillion package of Biden's priorities, which is still under negotiation between the House and Senate. A group of 9 moderate House Democrats got a commitment to vote Monday on infrastructure, whether the larger package was finished or not. The deadline slipped to Thursday, but a leader of the moderates, Representative Josh Gottheimer, DNJ, said it wouldn't slip again. We're going to have a big week. We're going to bring the infrastructure bill to the floor, which she talked about, and we're going to have the votes, Gottheimer said. And we're going to continue doing what we've been doing, which is working on the $3.5 trillion package. More history shows why moderate Democrats may be hesitant about Biden's agenda as 2022 elections loom. The Senate has already approved the infrastructure bill, so House approval would send it to Biden. The chairman of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, Representative Peter DeFazio, Dior, called it the largest investment in transit ever and the biggest investment in passenger railways since the creation of Amtrak, the most bridge investment since the creation of the interstate highway system, and the largest investment in drinking water and wastewater in history. Americans are tired of potholes damaging their cars, failing bridges, decrepit transit, trains that derail, water mains that explode, sewer systems that back up into their basement and pollute our rivers, DeFazio said. House Speaker of the Nancy Pelosi, D. Calif, right, and Representative Ilhan Omar, D. Minnesota, left, held hands as they arrive at a group photo to mark the National Recovery Month outside the U.S. Capitol on September 27, 2021 in Washington, D.C. Democrats haggle over $3.50 for Biden agenda. Dozens of progressive Democrats have threatened to oppose the infrastructure bill and potentially reject it if it moves without the $3.5 trillion package. Though Pelosi appeared positive Monday. Our members are so idealistic, strategic, and interested in getting results, Pelosi said after a meeting with Democratic caucus members Monday evening. It was a beautiful meeting. I'm so proud of them. The head of the Progressive Caucus, Rep. Pramila Jayapal, D. Washington, said after the meeting, she wants to see where negotiations on the $3.5 trillion package stand before the vote on infrastructure. More Congress enters eventful week. Infrastructure vote, government shutdown. Possible key senators have urged less spending and taxation. Sens. Joe Manchin, D. West Virginia, and Kyrsten Sinema, D. Arizona, who each said the $3.5 trillion price tag is too high, are expected to meet with Biden again Tuesday at the progressives say they should spell out what should be cut from the proposal, such as providing universal pre-kindergarten and community college, paid family and medical leave, and an expansion of Medicare. Let's get through the step of getting the actual legislative text, the agreement from the Senate, Jayapal said. Then we can talk about everything else. But some of it depends on what that conversation is like. What is a commitment, other than a vote that's not going to be held up? Another progressive Democrat, Representative Ilhan Omar of Minnesota, said she is optimistic that enough work on the larger package will have been completed so that she can support the infrastructure bill on Thursday. She hopes that meetings continuing Tuesday will lead to greater agreement on what can pass both the House and Senate. I think all of that is gamed out. We will be in a better position to make a decision how we move forward, Omar said.